Mackrell International folk from across the world, thank you so much for joining us. Every now and then, you're paddling around LinkedIn and you stumble across something, and you go, "Oh, that's quite interesting. Well, I'll dip in and see." And the delight when I joined a webinar that Darren and James from the Legal MBA ran, and I thought, oh, wow, these guys are talking commercial sense. They have legal experience, they have commercial experience, they are putting the two together. And in the context of this fast paced, fast changing world of ours, where the horse and chariot of AI is galloping away, and we're not sure how that is going to affect us. I have literally just come out of a meeting of the International Bar Association's Chief Operating Officers Group, who were discussing AI implementation and the effects on pricing, operating models, culture in law firms. And so this talk is brilliantly timed, and I'm delighted to have James and Darren with us. They will do their own intros much better than I will, and also it's enough. It's enough of me, and over to them.
Thank you, Keith, and welcome everybody, wherever you are in the world. You're most welcome. We're really pleased to be here, and we'll cover this session. We'll touch on everything Keith has covered there. If you are interested and you're thinking about what the business and commercial response to AI should be, then you're in the right place. Really happy for this session to be interactive and to have some questions, answers, discussions. Even happy to have the odd argument if that's if that's what we're in the mood for. But our real hope is that this is a thought-provoking session and that it helps you to consider some of the challenges and also the opportunities that the rapid implementation and adoption of AI can potentially have on all of our practices, our firms, and our lives. Just by way of quick intros to myself and James. So I'm Darren Mee. I'm a former partner in one of the big accountancy firms where I led the UK consulting business for a number of years. For most of my professional career and then in my independent consultancy career, I have worked almost exclusively with law firms. And I know you'll find this really hard to believe, given the lack of wrinkles on my skin, although these lights and cameras are showing them up now. But I've been working with law firms for the past 2 decades now. An MBA myself, and I have recently, within the last 18 months, completed a course on generative AI for the legal profession at Berkeley Law School as well. So hopefully up to speed on both the sort of theoretical and the academic, and also the practical with real law firms. James is a long-suffering colleague of mine. We worked together in the consulting world and independently. James has also had a number of years working in-house with some of the very large global law firms, including DLA Piper, Hogan Lovells, and most recently Denton's, where James led a number of business units, including the innovation arm. And Denton's were one of the first movers to implement a number of AI solutions. So again, hopefully some real practical points to share there as well. Just one point of housekeeping. Very happy if you want to come off mute and just ask questions or put the hand up emoji. Equally, if you don't fancy doing that, I think if you wiggle your mouse around, there should be the chat function or the Q&A function. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in as we go. James and I will keep an eye on them. We might save them up until the end in the interest of time, but we'll keep an eye and just pop them in there as questions come up. So I think we're all excited to cover this topic. So let's dive straight in. We'll try and cover the content within sort of 55 to 60 minutes, and leave lots of time for questions and discussion at the end. Although I'm always conscious in these environments, no one ever wants to go first. So if if anyone wants to ask a question as we go, break the deadlock, then please do so. Hopefully, I'll be able to share a couple of slides as we go as well. I'm sure someone will shout up if I'm not. Um, so let's cover what this session is going to be about, but we'll start in true professional fashion with some disclaimers and what it's not about. Any cycling fans that remember the Lance Armstrong autobiography from many years ago that was called "It's Not About the Bike"? I feel like I've ripped Lance off here. This session is not about the tech, so you'll be hopefully pleased to know we don't work for a technology vendor. We're not going to try and sell you the latest whizzy artificial intelligence software, so you can all relax on that. We don't have an axe to grind with comparing and contrasting different technologies and saying this one's better than the other. Um, so whilst we'll be referencing AI throughout this session, rather than focusing on the technology itself, we will focus on the really important business and commercial implications and decisions that each of us will need to make as AI becomes more of a fixture in our lives. In terms of what we will cover, we're going to start by just modeling two scenarios with a hypothetical firm. We'll show a P&L and we'll show two outcomes, a negative scenario and a positive one, just to set the scene, and show what the potential impact of AI, both positive and negative, might be. We'll then get into the bulk of the session. Pricing is such an important topic when it comes to AI, particularly if you think, hopefully this will be fairly self-evident, if you work on an hourly based pricing model or an hourly billing rate. The introduction of a piece of technology which fundamentally reduces the number of hours that are taken, that there is some tension, there's some inherent friction there to be unpicked. So we'll cover a number of areas there around pricing strategies and also fee types and what we might consider as we enter the AI era. I heard there was at least one individual from the US, someone in Washington. So I'm afraid we have quoted Donald Rumsfeld with the known knowns, the unknown unknowns, and the known unknowns from his famous speech from about 2002. Really, just to illustrate, there are still some things that we don't know about the potential impact of AI. Most notably, how good the technology will be at automating certain activities. But importantly, there are a lot of things that we do know already, or at the very least, if they're not known, they are knowable. And we'll introduce a model partway through this session that will hopefully give you a couple of different options to start to get a decent estimate of what the potential impact of AI might be on different work types or even potentially different practice areas within your firms or your areas. Final piece related to operations. This is a bit of a bugbear of mine, and this might be a soapbox moment, but we will then make the case that efficiency is not the same as productivity. And there are many people in the press and also within legal tech vendors that either intentionally or unintentionally just play a little bit fast and loose with using these terms interchangeably. The purpose of that session is not to for that not to be a dictionary definition and to become pedants about language, but it's really to point out why the difference between efficiency and productivity is absolutely vital when it comes to the implementation of AI and the impact that it might have on our firms. And then right at the end, we will outline some potential things of what could you do, and that might range from particular strategic approaches down to real tactical actions that you can take right now. James, I think I'm going to hand over to you. given that this is a session that talks about technology, this will be the ultimate test because we're going to try and use some technology within Zoom here, and I'm not not 100% sure it will work, so we might have to be a bit creative with how we go.
Thanks, Darren. Well, I've already had a look. I think we have to go slightly lower tech than the Wizzy polls, but it'll be all right. If you could maybe just skip to a couple of slides ahead, it would be really helpful for us. There's just a couple of questions we'd like to ask up front, just to understand, I guess, where you're coming from in your perspective on AI. I wonder, probably the best way is just in the chat. If you just pop in one, two, three, four, or five, and we can just see on balance what comes through. And I suppose the question is, what is your perspective on the potential impact of AI? Ranging from a very bearish or a negative impact on the left with one, um, it's going to have a negative and a significant impact on the profession, all the way through to that more bullish, optimistic. It's going to have a significant impact, but this time it's going to be positive. Um, right. Right. We're skewing to the right. I think we've got some fives, some fours, three. Okay, that's always a two, just to mix things up. Thanks. That's how it does. So generally, it looks like there's I suppose, a skew towards four is probably the most prevalent answer there. So optimistic and a pretty significant impact. Thinking now about our second question, if you could bring up the next slide, please, Darren. I suppose thinking about the size of that impact in terms of efficiency savings or time savings. Again, I think just one, two, three, four, or five in the chat. How much time do you think, would you expect, do you hope that AI might save? Um, some five, three, four, threes. This one's a bit more split. Probably fours. I think we seem to be landing on fours here. So between. I want a two, another two. So I think generally, I think we're in the 26 to 35%, maybe a little bit, maybe the bottom end of that, sort of maybe around the 25, 26% across those two categories, three and four. Which actually, as it turns out, is very helpful because for ease of maths, rather than this being a prediction of what we think, we've used 25% as our assumption within our scenarios as we go through. So that's really helpful, if only as a test of the chat function. So now you have no excuses for entering your questions as we go because we know it works. But Darren, do you want to pick up these initial scenarios just to talk through this positive and this negative scenario we'll work through for the rest of the session?
Yes, definitely. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed we skipped one slide, which was another little disclaimer, which was just to say, unfortunately, neither James nor I own a crystal ball, and we do not have the power of predicting the future. However, it looks like we probably do because I think the consensus on this call was maybe a 25% saving due to AI, and that's why we've put a line in the sand as well. What we want to do here is just illustrate a base case for a firm. So we have a typical hypothetical profit and loss statement for a small to medium sized firm. So all in UK currency, but a fee income of about 20 million pounds. I think for our US colleagues or anyone that references this to US, I think what is that these days? 25 million US dollars, 30 maybe. Direct fee and a staff costs of 6 million pounds, gross profit of 14 million, indirect overheads or operating costs of 9 million, leaving us with an operating profit of 5 million pounds at the end. And in this hypothetical firm, we're going to assume this is a lovely egalitarian firm where 20 partners get an equal share of that operating profit and have a profit per equity partner of £250,000. Now, if we take that as the base case, we're going to show two scenarios here, one a really negative one and one a positive upside. The important thing to bear in mind with this, in both cases, we are modeling a 25% efficiency saving, both in scenario A and scenario B. And whilst there are a lot of assumptions and simplifications in this, the point that we're trying to make here is it's not necessarily whether AI saves 25% or 5% or 50%. Obviously, that's important. But what we're illustrating here is all of our collective responses to the implementation of AI is the thing that will have a more material impact on whether we end up with a negative scenario or a positive scenario. So let's have a look at one. Admittedly, this is an extreme example, and it's intentionally extreme to illustrate the point. But the assumptions in scenario A are that this firm has 100% hourly rate billing. It has a cost-based pricing strategy where whatever the cost to deliver the work is, we apply a margin to it, and then that's our price. The other assumption in here, along with the 25% efficiency saving, is that we pass on that 100% of that efficiency saving onto our clients. So it takes us 25% less time, therefore we bill our clients 25% less. Now, that touches on a couple of important points around a commercial model. But the impact of that, we end up with 25% off our top line, which flows all the way through to the bottom, and we end up making zero in terms of operating profit and PEP at the end of the year. Appreciate that's an extreme example. Scenario B, the assumption around the efficiency saving, just to reiterate this one more time, is exactly the same. There's a 25% efficiency saving modeled into this. The difference is down to the commercial decisions that this firm is making. So first of all, rather than passing on 100% of that efficiency saving, this firm has decided to and been successful in splitting the difference. So if we get a 25% efficiency saving, 12.5% of that is passed on to the client, and the firm works hard to convert that efficiency saving into an actual productivity saving. And I mentioned we'll explain the difference between the two later, but that's key. The point here, going back to the fact that the efficiency savings is the same in both scenarios, but the outcome is completely different. From our base case, scenario A ends up with us making 100% less than we did before, and scenario B ends up with us making 66% more than the base case. I hope that makes sense. But the mathematics of this are less important than the principle of our commercial response to this stimulus is more important than the stimulus itself. James, let's move into the pricing arena, and maybe we'll pause for some interaction and some questions as we go, and maybe another poll.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And to that scenario A and scenario B, one of the key differences was around the approach to pricing. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time to just step through that and outline some of those differences and what that looks like. If you could put the next slide, Darren, this is a model that we refer to in our training, and I normally spend a whole session talking about it, but I'll move a lot quicker for the benefit of this group. What we're essentially doing here is showing what we call the pricing landscape. So the line going from left to right, essentially the numbers will get bigger as we go to the right-hand side. And there are two perspectives. There's an internal perspective, so from the law firm's perspective as the service provider. And then there's an external perspective in the top half of the slide, numbers around pricing that happen outside. If we just step through a quick example, say we have a piece of work and we know what the current price is. The current price is £5,000. It might be a range, if it is hourly rate, but for simplicity, let's stick with that. We also know internally what our cost to deliver is. In this example, it's £2,000, and the difference between those two, 5,000 minus 2,000, is 3,000 of gross profit, a 60% margin. We also know what our competitors tend to charge for this piece of work, and we can articulate that and show that on this range as well. And that is a range. Not everybody is offering the same service at £5,000, but they're offering a range of £3,000 to £7,000, and we're in the middle of that range. We can then introduce, I think, two key numbers around value. The first is what is the client's perception of the value of that legal work, which we said here is £10,000, and we would distinguish that from the value of the underlying transaction. So the £100,000 here, it might be the value of the property being bought or sold, the value of the company being bought or sold, the value at stake within a dispute for damages or whatever it is. So we can quite quickly sketch out for a given piece of work, well, what does our pricing look like in this context? And then we can layer on three different strategies or approaches to pricing on top of this. So we can add in cost-based pricing or cost plus margin pricing, which is shown in grey, and that is pricing anchored in the cost to deliver plus a profit margin. We can price with reference to our competitors, and we can say whatever our competitors are doing, we will price within that range, and we've shown that as blue here. And finally, we can price, with reference to value shown in yellow or in gold, which is to say we're going to anchor our price and what we charge in the perceived value of how the client sees the value of the legal work. So we have this landscape and we have these three strategies. If you could pull up the next question, it'd just be helpful again as context for us in here. In that context, what is your predominant pricing strategy? Fully appreciate that it will depend. Sometimes you'll be pricing with reference to competitors and market rates to win a piece of work. Other times it will be based on cost to deliver. Other times it will be value. But generally within your firm, one, two, or three, it tends to be a cost-based pricing strategy, which tends to be the hourly rate model. Is it competition-based with reference to your competitors, or is it value-based with reference to how the clients perceive the value? Again, just appreciate a one, two, or three in the chat, if you can. Got a 1, we've got a 3/2, we've got a 1, 2, yeah. Yeah, I suppose this is actually, I suppose, the benefit of when we have it as a poll, you can only pick one, but actually some of the nuance that's coming here with a 3/2 and a 1 is helpful, as opposed to hedging, sort of, it depends. So I think generally we do have a couple of threes in there, or there's a 3/2, but I think generally we're kind of 1s and 2s, so kind of cost-based and competition-based. If you could put up the next slide, Darren, this time I think just presenting those three strategies as points on a triangle. And when we ask that question within our partner training, we actually get a really similar picture to what's come through here, which if you pull the sort of the blue dots up, it tends to be 1s and 2s. So I'm pricing with reference to, well, how long is this piece of work take me to deliver? What's the cost there? What are my competitors? Do I have to, sharpen my pencil and reduce the rates to win the work? So if we have a group of, say, 12 partners, we might have one or two that are saying, whilst we price with reference to hours and cost, maybe we add a premium if there's a tight deadline or there's a high need or there's a quick turnaround time required. So there's a little bit of a value component. But this is the shape that we tend to see. And so when we think about that in the context of AI, then I think we can look at I suppose the exposure of your pricing strategy in the context of AI. So the first one with competition based, you're very vulnerable. Your pricing is very vulnerable to your competitors' investment in AI, almost irrespective of what you yourself are doing with AI and the efficiencies and the pricing. If all of your competitors, for example, buy a product, they get a 25% efficiency saving, they decide to pass that all through to their clients, that's going to cause pricing pressure for you. You're vulnerable to that. At the top left with cost-based, there is this inherent tension with the hourly rate model in particular, that if you're putting any kind of technology in that makes you work faster, then it's reducing the hours you're charging. So there's this tension and there's this threat around the efficiency, and it's difficult to benefit from those AI investments and those efficiencies if you're still pricing with relation to delivery cost. Which leaves us with value based on the right-hand side, and that is the strategy that is best placed to benefit from AI investments. If you can anchor your prices in the perceived value that your clients have, you can, if not increase prices, you can certainly have a better chance at defending your prices within this changing landscape caused by AI. So another question, if AI does reduce the time taken on a piece of work or generally across them by that sort of 25%, what are you intending to do when it comes to pricing? Will you try to defend your current prices and take the savings for yourself, get the profitability boost? Will you pass the savings fully through to your client? Or will you in some way split the difference? Not necessarily 50-50 or evenly, but in some way you'll take some benefit, the clients will take some benefit. Got a couple of quick ones off the mark. So trying to defend prices, split the difference. It's a what fairly even ones and threes. I think it's telling. We've run this session a few times now. I don't think we've ever had a two. No one is opening gambit is we're going to pass the savings through to clients. So there is some extent to which you're wanting to capture some of those efficiency savings to defend the price, but maybe a realism that you're going to have to split the difference with the clients to some extent. If we come back to the pricing landscape, please, Darren, and let's just look through this scenario. So appreciating that in the real world, those three strategies on price will all come into play at any one time. But just to kind of, I suppose, force the point, let's just step through each one in turn and say, well, what's the impact going to be on pricing and profitability in each case? So in the first instance, if we are pricing with reference to our competitors, two things are going to happen. One, their own cost to deliver, your competitors' cost to deliver will reduce by 25%. And let's assume for simplicity that their pricing will come down by 25%. So rather than sitting in the middle of a £3,000 to £7,000 range with our own £5,000 price point, we're now sitting right at the top. We're now expensive compared to the market. And so where we were once in the middle of the pack, we're now at the top end, and that might be a difficult position to maintain or justify or hold. Why am I assuming that the cost of delivery reduce? That being the time savings and the efficiency from the AI. If we're in a 25% scenario, we're saying I'll stick with 10 hours. If the piece of work takes 10 hours to do in the current world, we're saying by putting AI into the mix, it's now taking us 7.5 hours. And because we're pricing by the hour, then it will drop as well. I appreciate there will be technology costs that will sort of muddy the water a little bit. There will be increased licensing costs, but for simplicity, that's the basis of the assumptions here.
I think, James, the other key assumption is that, as often happens in any industry, that there will be certain firms that will go first, but then eventually all firms adopt similar technologies. So I think that's the other assumption in here, isn't it? That our competitors and our own firm adopts this technology, and we all benefit from the, as you say, labour cost reduction.
Yeah, and it's possibly a little bit clearer on the next sort of animation of this when we are looking at it through that cost-based lens. So I suppose depending on are you going to split the difference or not? In terms of intent, if it just passed through the full 25% drops, we end up back in the middle of the pack in terms of our competitors and the pricing, but our gross profit drops in pound terms. It's gone from £3,000 to 2,250. Our gross margin stays the same at 60%, but the profit in absolute terms has reduced. Now, what about the cost of the AI tool, implementation? Yes, agreed. I mean, I think the simplifying assumption is, I suppose it's a net benefit of 25%. So to factor in initial work and training and rework and all the rest of it, perhaps I'll do the maths off the top of my head. It saved half the time to make it easier in gross efficiency savings on performing the task, but we've added in an additional 25% of hours in terms of review and supervision. But the simplifying assumption here is there is a net benefit. Or it takes even longer.
I think it's worth.
I think Simon, who's asking the question, I think you were on the two, on the negative and bearish on the earlier question. So I can appreciate the perspective. Based on Darren's comments, does the model then assume lower employee headcount? No, it doesn't. We'll come to that and bring it back to the P&L shortly in terms of that is an option. As the hours drop, you reduce the headcount to kind of manage the caseload and the utilization.
James, do you mind if we just pause for a minute? Because I think
Yeah.
Simon brought up a really important nuanced point here that I think cost-based pricing, typically within a law firm, references obviously we all have a standard rate, and all of our I'm assuming most of our colleagues will have a rate, and to a certain extent that absorbs some of the overheads of the firm. So the costs that you would expect to pay for insurance and for your buildings and offices and for your support functions and so on. Um, I guess for simplicity, what we've said here is assuming that rate stays static, and that's an important assumption. Um, you could make an argument that our clients don't really care what our rate is; they care what the price they're charged is, and price is an element of rate times hours. Um, part of this part of the commercial negotiation around implementing AI, and we're hearing this from some of our clients at the moment, that there is an expectation from clients, whether this is valid or not, there is an expectation from clients that, well, we know you've implemented AI, or even we know that AI exists, therefore our prices are going to go down, right? Not up. And I think that puts us as leaders of our firm and as professionals in a situation where we have to, I suppose, back to the question of what are you going to try to do? The important word in this sentence is try. Try to defend your current prices and bank the savings. That there are, if that's the approach that you're going to take, I guess there are a number of different routes to try and explore there. You could either say, well, we've always done things based on cost, and even though our labour costs have gone down because we're taking less time. Simon, I think the point you're making, and please jump into the comments or come off mute, your operating costs of investing in technology and implementing it and training people and all that good stuff, our cost has gone up. So your response there might be to your clients, well, the number of hours we work has gone down, but our cost to deliver has gone up, so our rates have to go up. So back to this example, the answer still might be the price is £5,000. Does that make sense? And does that answer the question you?
Yeah, but I mean, you need to go right back to like I was in GE doing Six Sigma. I have my Six Sigma green belt, which was earned on improving law firm processes around registration of mortgages.
Yeah.
Two internal firms, figure out what their processes were. Neither of them had a stable process, put them on a stable process, etc., etc. And it was all online tech. That's expensive, hugely expensive. And in discussion with people like Thomson Reuters around co-counsel, they're offering no assistance. And you hear about AI champions. They're offering no assistance by way of standing beside a desk, someone's desk, and working out how do you do stuff now, to then figure out what kind of AI tool. And Thomson Reuters Co-Counsel has about 7 different tools, not all of which are generative AI. Been using AI for years in court disclosure bundles and all that sort of stuff. So it's not new, but there's a vast amount of enterprise expense involved, and not every corporation even takes on, say, Six Sigma or lean version, right? And clients so far are not saying that they are seeing efficiency with AI for this very reason. They're using it for press releases or whatever, but they're not. I've been sent their attempt at a contract, and it's came out of ChatGPT or whatever, and it's laughable.
Yeah.
So I really question. I mean, when you talk about cost of delivery, some firms just won't be able to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think
they'll die trying.
Yeah. I guess another assumption in this is you
but
know,
they can.
best case, firms are spending an awful lot of money on this technology. They're doing it, presumably, at least an element of the justification is this is going to make things more efficient. Not all firms.
It's look, I mean, we should move on, but it's FOMO. It's because the chief exec or whatever thinks it's a good thing. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But these are mighty assumptions, is all I'm saying. And look, definitely worth thinking all this through. And I think it's insightful what you're saying. But I would not, there be dragons, right?
Yeah.
where it's the old maps, right, with people sailing around the sea with just sort of pictures of dragons and outlandish. The Kraken lurks.
Yeah,
I've said enough.
We'll just stay tuned for the session or the section in a little bit. I'm also a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so we'll be kindred spirits on that. But I think that's a really big part of this. If firms think just plugging in the technology and we're magically going to get 25% efficiency savings, which turn into productivity savings, and clients get big price savings, it is not that. If we've given the impression it's that simple, I really hope we haven't. But it's really important, Simon. So thank you for flagging that. Keith, I saw you pop your hand up, and Simon, thank you for going first with breaking the silence as well.
I really want you and James to crack on because I've seen the presentation. You get into some of the detail, but really interestingly, the session we've just had, we had 20 chief operating officers of mid-sized, but seriously mid-sized firms from across the world, and one of them was talking about a scenario where they have been using a combination of Legora and Copilot internally for some time, and on certain workflows, they've reduced their workflows by 50% or around 50%. And they've run it to make sure that it works. They've tested it, they've optimized it, and they've gone, right, okay, what do we do now in terms of our pricing model? Well, this used to take us 10 hours. It's now taking us 5. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll sort of split the difference and we'll charge the client for 8. We'll be transparent with the client. And we said, by the way, we've implemented blah, blah. There's some sunk costs. So we're not giving you all the savings. We're now billing you for 8 hours. They said on the chat, we've suddenly found that our client has gone to a competitor who's using Legora and internal processes and blah, 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 blah. And is saying, oh, by the way, we've reduced the way we do this, and we're only going to charge you for 6 hours. And they suddenly went, what? And we suddenly started to have the internal discussion about, well, if we go down to 6, then our profit margins are massively reduced. What happens when they go down to 5.5? And the whole point about the race to the bottom based on the hourly billing model, and even the sort of, well, let's split the difference with our clients. So they are now having an internal discussion about the right way to price internally, and that's something that came out of tried, tested efficiency savings, and doing something which seems logical but isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. James.
Yeah, I think, yes, if you could probably bring up slide 17 and actually to both Keith and Simon on that, I think there's I suppose to our disclaimer at the beginning, we don't have the crystal ball. We don't know what the answer is. We don't know if it's a 25% saving or it's 25% more inefficient, and actually all of this goes the other way. I think really the aim of this is to just show, well, what are the moving parts that need thinking about? And if you are sat on that 1 to 5 scale of bullish to bearish, if you're in the negligible impact, then it's not 25%. If you're in the bearish impact, all the numbers go the other way in some respects, and you've got a slightly different challenge. But the frameworks and the way of thinking these issues through, I would hope is helpful. So yes, well, with cost-based pricing then here, so this is exactly that scenario you just said, Keith. It's 10. Our competitors have just passed it all the way through, and they're down to 6. They're down to 5 hours, and whilst we can to a point maintain our gross profitability in terms of margin, the margin in pound terms drops. And then to the point on value-based pricing, just to round off this section on pricing, and Darren will introduce a bit around tasks and service design in a moment. I mean, if you can, and I think it is a big if, but if you can articulate your price in terms of value, it gives you the best chance of defending that price point. To the ones on the previous survey that want to defend price point, you're clearly saying we're charging you £5,000 because it takes a lot of time to do isn't particularly compelling if it now takes less time. But do you know what? I've saved your marriage, or I've efficiently done your divorce for you, or you bought the house, you've sold the house, and I can articulate in terms of value. That's where you have the chance of defending that price point. And if you can do that, if you can, best of both worlds, you've adopted the AI, you've adopted the tool, you've got the efficiency savings, but you've managed to defend your price. You've managed to differentiate yourself from your competitors, so you've kind of broken that race to the bottom. You referenced, Keith. That's sort of the best of both worlds with all of this. But as I said at the start with this pricing bit, sort of forcing it into the three corners of that triangle in practice, it's much more nuanced in terms of how these factors are going to interact and play through. Darren, shall I come to you for? I think Donald Rumsfeld is next.
Well, I'm actually going to give Simon a big thanks, because it feels like we put him up to raise that question earlier about process. So here we go. I guess the key part of this is, to really achieve these benefits, as Simon said, absolutely spot on. This is going to require some changes to ways of working and to processes. At the moment, again, just to give you a bit of a frame of reference, so when you pick up, trade press or journals or the Financial Times or the Economist or whatever else, or even materials from technology vendors, a lot of the talk of efficiency savings is happening at this individual task level. We use this terminology just to be really clear. You have your overall service, whether that's a matter type, a particular work type, however you refer to it in your firm. That matter type or that piece of work will be underpinned by some kind of process. It might not be particularly formal, it might not be particularly formalized or documented, but there will be a number of processes that contribute towards delivering that work type. Each of those processes is made up of activities, and each of the activities is made up of tasks. And I'm keen not to get into the detail of this, but this is just to illustrate it with a particular work type. If there are any corporate M&A lawyers on the session, please don't pick me up on any inconsistencies here. The purpose of this slide is not to show how well do James or Darren understand how to run a corporate M&A transaction. I'll save you the trouble. Not very well. We've never done one, but really to illustrate that model with a few examples. What we're finding is the technology is being adopted either formally or on the side of a desk to help make certain tasks more efficient. And as Simon alluded to, and hopefully we'll make really concrete here, there is a difference and there's a distinction between, I've managed to make this task a bit more efficient and this task a bit more efficient, versus I've managed to make this whole process more efficient and we're much more productive and we can deliver these specific services for a much lower price point. So all of the examples that James has shown about, just blanket applying that 25% efficiency saving, modeling that through, there is work to be done to convert those task level efficiency savings into actual productivity savings. Not least because those efficiency savings can, one valid way of realizing the benefits of those efficiency savings will be for the fee earners and partners that are delivering that work to think, well, we can deliver the same work for the same fee with less hours. I'll embrace that, or I'll absorb that as part of a better work-life balance. That might be a perfectly appropriate way to do this. So rather than having to work on this transaction till gone midnight and maybe not all of that time makes it onto the clock, maybe I'm just not working till midnight. I think this is where the subtleties start to come in, that there is a difference between deploying a technology that has some efficiency saving and then operationalizing that. Back to the question on how much time will AI save, we all had a bit of an estimate and a subjective look at this right at the start of the call. I previously set up the business improvement and automation practice in one of the big accountancy firms, and we had just like Simon mentioned, a bunch of Lean and Six Sigma process experts that would go around and sit at the desks of people that were delivering the work. So you had some technologists, and then you also had some process consultants. And those process consultants, like myself, are not technology experts. They would be focused on trying to answer two key questions. How long does each task take, or how long does each process take? And how often is the task done? The technologists in the group would then focus on the third question, which is what proportion of time will AI save from this particular task? And without going into this in too much detail, for each of you, two of these numbers should be well known, or at the very least should be knowable from the time records that you have and from your vast experience of working on particular work types. The last one might not be particularly well known, but my argument would be it's much more important to look at the size of the opportunity for the particular tasks that could be automated, than to argue over whether it's going to be 25% or 30% or 35%. And maybe one way of illustrating this, we have this table as a bit of a rule of thumb or a bit of a heuristic. And really it's looking at two things. How often is the task done? And then along the side here, what we say here, how much time could you save by automating the task? Another way of saying that is how long does each task take? And the number in the middle is really the number of annual hours that are saved by, if you could wave a magic wand and automate that, how many hours could be saved? And I'll just illustrate two examples here just to illustrate that point about it's really the first two numbers that are most important. We have two tasks here. One, a task that takes 2 hours to do. This might be reviewing a contract or drafting a particular document or anything like that. And we think, how many times across the course of a typical day is that task done? Now, in a medium to large size department or a medium to large size firm, depending on what that task is, that might be done multiple times a day by multiple people, possibly even 50 times a day in this example. And the opportunity there, the amount of time that individual task takes, is 26,000 hours per year. If we contrast that with another task that's done, maybe it takes longer per task, it's 3 hours as opposed to 2 hours, but it's only done once a week. Even if you could automate 100% of that, the net impact to the firm would just be 144 hours. And we probably, each of us, spend more time making and drinking cups of coffee than 144 hours a year. I know I certainly do. That's why I can't sleep. But if you take nothing else away from this part, it's really to encourage you to focus on, as Simon quite nicely put, focus on the process and the work type and less on the technology. That final bit of how could AI help us with this, I think treating that as a binary question rather than trying to put a percentage on it is still important. But I would argue anyone with any experience of using commercially available or tools that are available to all of us, ChatGPT or Claude or any of those tools, is starting to develop a bit of an understanding of the types of tasks that AI lends itself to. It's reviewing documents, it's extracting information from documents, it's summarizing documents. It might even be creating a first draft of a document based on some inputs. They're the kind of things that your partners, your fee earners, and yourselves will be able to go around and fairly subjectively to begin with, just start to highlight, within any process, what of these tasks, what of these activities have the potential to be automated? And here we've listed some. Equally, and this will be much more important as we start to talk about value, but there are probably things that will never be automated in a million years. Probably stand to be corrected on that, but things that human beings will always be better at than technology, such as supporting the client through the deal, holding their hand through one of those bet the company style transactions for those people that are selling their company or buying a company. That the empathy and the project management that comes with that'll be quite difficult to replicate with technology. So if we go through that, we break our work types and our processes down into individual tasks, we can then come up with a couple of lists. Some lists that are tasks that could be automated, and then using that little table, we can come up with what the opportunity is, and those tasks that we don't think have any potential to be automated. And if we're feeling like we're sitting on the fence, we could also have a category in the middle of we're not quite sure. But just illustrating this with a somewhat worked example, just identifying those tasks in an M&A transaction here with some subjective numbers around how many of those do we do per year and how long does each one take. In this hypothetical example, we're coming out with the cumulative effect of that being nearly 40,000 hours over the course of a year. And to Lynn's question of, based on the comments I made, does that mean we end up with reduced headcount? No, is the answer. Not necessarily. But 40,000 hours in this example would be the equivalent of 30 staff if 100% of that could be automated. And then you apply the sensitivity analysis to it of, well, what happens if 25% of that could be? What happens if 50%? What about 75%? And that's a well-established technique with most finance and operations professionals to model out the sensitivity of that. I'll come back to this in a moment around where this is likely to be felt. In fact, let's cover it now. Just some bespoke analysis that James and I have done based on publicly available data, just based on the proportion of hours that are carried out by different levels of seniority within a firm. One of the pushbacks that we hear around AI is AI won't replace me. I've got 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of experience. AI won't replace me. And that is probably correct, but it's also possibly the wrong question to be answering. I don't believe that those senior experienced individuals with a couple of decades of expertise will be replaced by AI. But nearly a third, based on this analysis, nearly a third of hours within a firm are carried out by relatively junior colleagues. Even if that's 20%, that's a significant number of hours. And it's probably the case that the tasks and activities that are carried out by those more junior individuals are the things that are perhaps more likely to be replaced by AI. So I think rather than taking these numbers, thinking about it within your own firms and thinking, well, what proportion of hours are done by trainees, by newly qualified solicitors, by those people with 1 to 2 years of experience, by 3 to 5 years, 5 to 8, 8 to 10, and so on. The numbers here are less important than the principle of, the example I've just shared by breaking down a process into tasks. That's a very detailed way of starting to get an understanding of what the potential impact of AI is. This is a much quicker but much more subjective and a bit of a rougher estimate. Thinking about those tasks and activities that are done by junior people and the hours spent on them currently might just give you a bit of a proxy or an example, or an estimate, sorry, not an example, an estimate of what the potential impact could be here. And then Lynn, to your question, sorry, Simon, big challenges. How does someone with 0 years PQE get to 3 to 8 years PQE? Absolutely. Another great question, Simon, another great great comment. The sort of legacy impact of this is, and how do we pass on that knowledge to the partners of the future, I think is a very real important question, and what those skills are as well. Please don't take from the fact that we're presenting this webinar that we are absolute advocates that this is nirvana and this is the way forward. I think there are some very real unintended consequences as a result of this, and figuring out how do we train our partners of the future is something that we'll also have to wrestle with. Lynn, I want to pick up on this point of lowered employee headcount as well, and I've mentioned this a few times, that efficiency and productivity aren't the same thing. But just to give you a bit more context on this and a bit more detail, so that you're able to critique statements as if software vendors approach you and say, look, I've got this magical technology that it's going to do X, Y, and Z. Efficiency is generally measured at the level of the task. Productivity is generally measured at the unit of analysis of a person or a group of people. And there is a big leap between I've managed to make this task more efficient and I've managed to make this person or this group of people or this industry or this society more productive. It's a little bit of a simplification, but efficiency is generally about doing the same with less, and productivity is generally about doing more with the same. So, Lynn, to your question, there is a potential, and again, it's based on how do we change our commercial models, how do we gear up our operations, that we could keep the same number of people, but in changing our operations and the way we go to market, we try to do more with the same people. And I think I like this example at the end because I think it makes it real. There is a big difference between saying there is a task or a document that I used to review, and it used to take me an hour to do a standard document. I can now do it in 12 minutes. There is a big difference between saying that and saying I used to be able to review one standard document per hour. I can now review 5 documents per hour. And then those two things are conflated and used interchangeably far too often. So if you take nothing else away from the efficiency and productivity point, please take that away. I hope that all makes sense. Lynn, so there will be more competition in the marketplace for a finite pool of work. Some great questions. I'm really glad we've raised this. There is a school of thought that people refer to as the Jevons paradox, and generally ultimately the point of that is if you make something more efficient, then there will be more of it. So there is an argument. There are a number of very valid commentators on this exact topic that think the impact of AI might be that at the moment there are certain people and certain organizations that are priced out of accessing legal services or access to justice. If we can reduce the price point and we can make things more efficient, maybe that opens up the market and there is far more work. So it's not a done deal. It doesn't necessarily mean there will be less work. One of the best examples I think I can give of this, again, it's about physical products rather than professional services, but the principles are the same. At the turn of the 19th century, the introduction of the production line by Ford Motor Company was a huge productivity tool. And I do mean the word productivity there. It gave a huge amount of efficiency savings, but it also created a great amount of productivity. And if you think before the production line, I don't have the exact stats, but there were a relatively few or a very relatively small market of people that could afford to buy an automobile or a car. By the time production lines and standardized manufacturing techniques came in, the cost of manufacturing and the price of selling a car came right down, and we ended up with far more cars, we ended up with far more jobs. You think MOT technician, garage operator, service station person, petrol pumper, all of those were jobs that didn't exist prior to the introduction of that technology. So there are people that think that the introduction of this technology might actually create more demand and more jobs. So I wanted to share that for completeness. James, conscious of the time, can I hand over to you to sort of bring this all together?
Yes, thanks, Darren. And if we come back to that base case and those two scenarios, the sort of positive and the negative, and really just to focus on the fee income, because that's really the thing that's driving this. We've simplistically deliberately not put in estimates of how much extra is it going to cost to buy all of the chatbots that we all need in our firms, but just looking at that fee income line, because that's really what's driving this over and under on the positive and the negative scenarios. And to, I suppose, introduce a model here around fee income. If you could put up the next slide, please, Darren. We take that base case fee income of £20 million. There are two ways of looking at that and two ways of if you like, creating that fee income. One is from an external perspective around the demand for services, and into that's kind of your point here. Does this demand ultimately go up or down? But to get to that £20 million, you can break that down into the number of clients and matters and the average fees charged. So for simplicity, 4,000 matters, £5,000 worth of fees equals £20 million of income. So that's one perspective on income. The second perspective on income then is from the internal perspective and from the perspective of managing capacity. And so you can get to the fee income of £20 million by looking at the number of fee earners multiplied by the number of billable hours, multiplied by their effective hourly rate. 100 times 1,000 times 200 gets you £20 million. The most interesting introducing this model is we can start to look at, well, with this scenario around the 25% efficiency saving, which of these metrics is it going to hit and what is the impact? And there are two more sort of KPIs I just want to tease out on here. One is a productivity measure on the right-hand side of fees per fee earner, being the number of billable hours times the effective hourly rate, £200,000 here. Also, noted sort of revenue per lawyer in some of the trade press. The other one is to look at it from the perspective of caseload, that being 4,000 matters divided by 100 fee earners. They've each got 40 cases or matters, and that divided by the number of hours that they're working, they're spending 25 hours per case or per matter each year. So with that scenario A, that negative scenario, we're just taking that 25% efficiency saving and we're just letting that pass all the way through to the client in terms of the lower costs. And we start to see the impact. So the first thing is that the hours per matter drop from 25 hours to 18.8 hours. And the average fees are dropping by 25% from the 5,000 that was on the previous slide to 3,750 shown here. So even though that efficiency improved, the productivity has actually dropped because we can see a drop in the number of billable hours. That's the 25% efficiency saving. We've dropped 250 hours off of 1,000. That times the effective hourly rate. The fees per fee earner is 150,000. So the big startling conclusion on all of this, when you flow that through, is that's where you have that pressure, that impact, that negative impact on fee income. It's reducing by the 5 million from 20 million to 15 million. Now, the scenario B, it's still based on the same assumption of 25%, but the key difference here is then, well, what do we do with it instead, and how do we drive a different outcome? So, as we can see with the numbers that have changed here, if I work sort of from left to right, instead of passing all of the pricing, the efficiency through to clients and down to 3,750, we take half of it. However we do it, we adopted some value-based pricing principles, but we managed to hold on to half of that efficiency saving. The prices only fall to 4,375. The 250 hours that we've saved per fee earner on that 25% efficiency, we've held that flat. We've held that at 1,000 hours. Now that means that caseloads have to go up. They've gone up to 53.3. The hours per case is still down, but the caseload has gone up. And because we've done that, the way the maths flows through on the average fees being held and we're holding the hours flat, fees per fee earner, that productivity measure, has increased to £233 per hour and £233,000. Now that's fine, I suppose, as a mathematical moving numbers around a spreadsheet exercise, but I think the practical point here is, well, what is it that needs to change to enable that? And I think the first thing I'd say is none of these relate to technology. I think that's a really important point in all of the discussions around AI. It's not really about the technology or the specifics of it. So the way to convert this efficiency saving into a productivity improvement or gain ultimately needs changes in 4 different areas. The first is around pricing and proposition strategies and the fee types. So they need to move in that direction of value-based pricing. The next is around operations, and some to a lot of things you were saying, the kind of the sitting at the side of people's desks and what does that mean and how can we realize that? What does it mean at a process or a service design level? But really a lot of that comes down to capacity management, work allocation, expectations around utilization, and approaches to supervision and quality control. Got a contract from ChatGPT and it was awful. There is a cost to managing that from a quality perspective. The third point then is around performance management and incentive structures. So we really need to be focusing performance management incentives around productivity measures and outputs. So fees per fee earner, revenue per lawyer, caseloads, rather than the inputs that law firms traditionally kind of incentivize billable hours targets, chargeable hours targets. I suppose at the very least, appreciate there's a big change. The incentive structures need to not punish efficiency. If you're paying bonuses for chargeable hours and you're introducing a technology that reduces chargeable hours, you're going to have some troubles there with adoption and seeing that through. But I think that the biggest point, and sort of as last and not least here, is the key thing that is driving this overall is around demand generation. So whatever you kind of want to call it, business development, marketing, lead generation, new work intake, the key thing here is the efficiency in this scenario, that 25% efficiency gain creates spare capacity, but the productivity is only going to improve if we can put that capacity to good use. And I think from mine and Darren's perspective, this is the bit that's missed in all of this. And Lynn, it kind of speaks, I think, directly to your point around will there be more competition in the marketplace? You have to go out and win more work in this kind of scenario. As a group, you've sort of landed on that 25 to 30% efficiency saving. You need to go out, you need to be thinking about how you're going to generate demand to make use of the fee earners and their billable hours. So if you're, I suppose if you're in a fortunate position and you have lots of work and you're turning clients away, and actually it's more around taking pressures off of your staff and lowering utilization hours, then perhaps not. But ultimately, you have capacity to an extra 33% of capacity to get back to the billable hours of 1,000. And I suppose the point here is we've got a little bit of a mix of some pricing upside and the demand generation to generate that 23 million of fee income in the middle. If you can't capture that pricing, if the pricing does just fall, as it does within scenario A, by 25%, you need 33% more cases, more matters to be able to just square the circle and get back to your £20 million. That I think is the key thing and the bit that's missing here, because that's a really big challenge. If I said to you tomorrow, can you go and win 20, 30, 40% more clients? I think that for most firms would require a step change from the marketing and business development activities that they're undertaking currently. Darren, can I hand back to you to sort of bring us to a bit of a close and hopefully have a bit of time for some discussion?
Yeah, thank you. And well done everyone for sticking with us. The numbers are done. No more numbers, thankfully. I appreciate some of this gets quite complicated, but if in a nutshell, I guess the point we're trying to make, this is not an IT issue. This is a commercial priority. And but we've highlighted some assumptions, we've put some simplification around it. That's essential to get these points across. Please don't disregard the principles because the examples might have assumptions or simplifications in them. Ultimately, though, the key thing is what will you do about all of this? And we've tried to simplify this down to 5 broad options that consider 4 big topics: pricing and commerciality, operations and process, propositions and service design, and growth and market. And this is always an option. Option 1 is don't change anything. Just go with the status quo. We've called it do nothing and wait for it all to blow over. We said right at the beginning, we don't have a crystal ball. We've all lived through fairly significant changes in technology and society. With COVID, the introduction of video calls, we wouldn't have been doing this 5 or 10 years ago. The internet, mobile phones, depends how far you want to go back. And things have been okay. There might not be a significant change as a result of the implementation of AI. It's not my personal view, but that Jevons paradox might work out. We end up with more work. We're able to defend prices, and it's all fine. So that is an option. There are 2 defensive approaches as well. One might be to actively try and protect the status quo. The whole piece we said around pricing of, look, our labour costs might have gone down because we don't need to spend as long on this, but we've invested £1 million in X technology. Therefore, we need to recoup that cost with you, Mr. or Mrs. Client. Therefore, the fee level is staying where the fee level was before. That is a totally appropriate strategy and an approach to go. The other defensive approach is to try and defend those prices and look to reduce costs or manage costs. And we've seen some of the larger firms, slowing down or reducing the number of trainees and juniors that they're taking in already. It's not across the board, but that's another defensive approach. Category 4, I'm going to dedicate to you, Simon. I think this is absolutely spot on. Proactively trying to convert those efficiency savings into productivity savings. It's not a case of just plug it in and it will work. We need to re-engineer processes and operations. We might have to refine some of our existing propositions. We might need to start experimenting with value-based pricing and moving in that direction. And we might need to look at proactive growth. Category 5 is like that, but supercharged. So everything's value-based by default. Might be tricky. Might be looking to standardize and automate lots of processes, not just tasks. We might develop some brand new propositions. There might be some products and services and productized services that we haven't even thought of yet that we implement. And then we sell at scale. Any one of these 5 generic approaches is potentially appropriate. But I guess what we wanted to do today is give you some food for thought, provoke some thought, and hopefully give you a bit of structure to simplify and think about some of the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. So I'll pause there. I know we're at 4:15. I think that was the time that we had this in the diary for, Keith, if that's right. James and I are very happy to hang on for a little bit and answer some questions, but appreciate some of you might need to drop off and go off to your next meetings. So thank you for your time. Hope it was valuable and thought-provoking.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Darren and James. Before we move on, thank you for joining us, first of all, and thank you for your questions. Any final questions before we let you get back to lawyering and rushing to your senior leadership teams to say we need to change the billing model, and we let Darren and James go back to finding a working crystal ball?
It's a very, very good discussion. Thank you. It's very worthwhile, and very impressed.
Thank you for joining us, Simon. I think that's what I took away from the first time I saw Darren and James. They are not promising the world. They're not promising crystal balls, but what they are doing is think about this.
Yeah, it's a framework for thinking about it, for sure.
Absolutely. It's a really good framework for thinking about it.
I think
Excellent.
your sort of last comment on the chat sound around, we've seen this type of effect in residential conveyancing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where my head's at. I'm sort of maybe with you on the skepticism around some of the press releases, but there's a bit where you kind of got to join the two things up. And if on the one hand you're saying this is going to change the world and all the rest of it, I think mine and Darren's view is if you don't go through this structured approach, the future looks a
Mm.
lot like residential conveyancing. It looks like a
Yeah.
race to the bottom, no differentiation, and a bit of a bloodbath in terms of profitability and very stressed conveyancers. And that doesn't feel like a good thing to be aiming for. But
Mm.
that feels like that's the most likely scenario if we don't sort of broaden out that conversation.
I joined DLA back in 97 with a business plan to focus the firm on e-commerce. Um, and that was fascinating to see both the client and the firm's business going online and what changes that wrought.
Mm.
And instead of they said you should have an e-commerce group. I said it's broader than that. Like everyone's practice is going to be affected. And so I said I just want a soft group of interested partners from across the firm, and we'll talk about how to leverage the opportunities. The one guy who wouldn't participate was in insurance, and he refused. And I went round one day to his office and walked in, and he had one of those green desk lamps, and his office was dark, but he was sitting under this green desk lamp. And I said, you know, why won't you come to us? It's not relevant to me, he said. And anyway, he just stonewalled me throughout the. So one last question: what's your charge out rate? And his charge out rate was £120 an hour. And I said, dude, you are not going to survive in DLA. Walked out. It was unkind, and they didn't.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just a race to the bottom. Like once you're in the grip of that sort of price competition, everything's standardized. There's only one way it's going to go. And even the mass conveyancing firms, you know, they were going to the wall. And people like Slater and Gordon, and they struggle with the mass claims management, mass conveyancing, etc. So my take has always been you've got to move up the value chain and stay strategic.
But also that ties into I've spoken to three GCs recently. One who is coming to our AGM in Munich in a couple of months' time.
Mm.
And interestingly, all of them have said, we know ChatGPT, we know AI is here, we know LLMs are here, we know legal AI is here. At this stage, we are not looking for our law firms for cost efficiencies. What we are asking our law firms and what we're asking external counsel is, one, are you using AI, legal or otherwise? If so, what? Two, how is that affecting your internal productivity? And three, what benefits is that going to bring us as a client? How is that greater insight, greater productivity going to benefit us? So it's interesting at the moment, and it's only a sample size of three, although they are three multinationals. The question isn't how much money are you saving us? It's okay, what are you going to bring to us to make our relationship better, and how are you going to bring greater insight and greater productivity to our relationship? Which I thought was interesting, because one is in India, one is in Germany, and one is in the US. So you've got three regional perspectives that, as I said, they're all significant multinationals. So,
but in any commercial negotiation now, you're saying, to what extent is AI present in the service that you're sending me, or the internal services that you're using to produce my service, right? Even if my service is not an AI service, and how you're managing the risks. And I come back to prompt injection, data poisoning, et cetera, you're seeing with this Claude bot thing and so on, prompt injection is just going crazy. And it's unlimited shots from anywhere on the planet. So it's fraudster's charter. And this business about agentic AI is, I mean, integrating this with your contacts, etc., etc. It's like, or accounts payable systems. I mean, GCs have got a real tiger by the tail, but not perhaps in ways that they've appreciated, because the hype is focusing them on the efficiency and productivity gains, not the security risks, etc.
Yeah.
And they're the things. I mean, the litigators are already having a field day with AI. And that is a growth area independently of how the firm is using AI. I've always been bored by legal tech and more interested in the legal aspects, legal questions arising from the use of technology. But,
there's a good chance
tech
that
law, not law tech.
Yeah, indeed. There's a very good chance that the litigators are going to create an awful lot more work off the back of this. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Newton's paradox in a different way. But look, I think a lot of the things we've been saying for a long time about talking about value, about articulating the problems that we solve as law firms, rather than I'm a employment lawyer with 30 years of experience and this listing in this Chambers 500, and we've boards, and the firm was created in 1824. It's all us.
Yeah.
I think the biggest change will actually be the market facing piece, how we position what we do, how we talk about the problems that we solve, the needs we address, the goals we help our clients achieve. And I can only see that really working well if market focus narrows. James and I were on a session with an existing client, a firm that's going through our legal mini MBA at the moment, and we did a session on market strategy, and we said, can you define your target markets? And the majority of people said something along the lines of any business that can afford to pay our fees. And when pressed, just would not go narrower than that.
Really?
Well, also any individual, because it was B2C as well. So it was almost any business or individual that can afford our fees, that's our customer. And
subject, of course, to KYC and sanctions.
I did ask about their views on Russian oligarchs or whatever, just to throw a cat amongst the pigeons. But that is the dynamic, isn't it?
That's then you get this adverse selection. People start getting desperate and they'll do anything.
Yeah.
The pilot high, sell it cheap, and then they become more and more desperate, and that's when they start cutting corners. And this is where you're coming back to the GCs. You're going, how are you managing that risk? If your fee earners are having to do, it's like journalists are having to write 10 stories a day, and guess what? The stories are terrible.
No.
Yeah, the standard of journalism's gone. So it's like, how are you going to make sure that the standard of the legal output you deliver to me is not going to decline massively?
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, I'm seeing people drop off. And we need to let you go back to lawyering and these two to, as I said, changing the world. So really, really appreciate you joining us. Dallas, we will be circulating the video next week once we've got it, because I'm pretty sure that there's some of this that you will be wanting to put in front of other partners. But yes, Darren, James, thank you so much. I will also be circulating Darren and James's contact details if you want to engage with them, or you're interested in actually getting them to either do a little bit of a deeper dive with your firm, or even interested in their legal MBA program for partners. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of day. And again, thanks for joining us.